We are on the draw here, but this is a keep. It's a slow keep, but it's a keep. On all of our lands essentially do come into play tap, which means we're going to be operating a turn behind. We'll see what this plains means by our opponent. Unclear exactly what deck we're up against so far. But now we've drawn a basic land, so that's nice. That can potentially enable our turn 2 Jace, and then we can loot. We can potentially do more stuff. Here's a Selfless Spirit. We do have the option to Grasp of Darkness, that Selfless Spirit now, but I think we just want to play our Jace and get the Haunted Dead into the graveyard as quickly as possible. So it looks like we are up against Bant Company. So our opponent's passing the turn, which basically is representing Spellcaller here. But I don't really feel compelled to do anything just yet. We have Haunted Dead, so we can discard 2 cards to it, including the Prized Amalgam. So we're just going to pass here. And there is the Spell Queller. As expected. So our opponent now has 4 mana. This could definitely mean Collected Company. It could mean Jamoka's Command. It could mean a number of different spells that our opponent's representing. But we're going to go ahead and loot here. And it looks like another copy of Jace was what we found. We're going to go ahead and discard this Haunted Dead. And now what we can do is activate the Haunted Dead's ability. We can discard this Jace and the Prized Amalgam. And now we've got our Haunted Dead coming into play. And our Prized Amalgam is going to trigger, which means it is going to be coming back out onto the battlefield as a 3/3 at the end of this turn. But now we also have a 1/1 Spirit in play. And we can actually block this, our opponent's Selfless Spirit, if we so choose to here. We'll see if our opponent is going to do anything before blockers. And so it is going to be a Collected Company. And here's a Reflector Mage and a Spell Queller. So it may be that our opponent wants to bounce our Spirit with the Reflector Mage. Okay, it looks like instead it's going to be the Haunted Dead. Interesting. Well, in that case, we are going to go ahead and make this block. And we're going to get our Prized Amalgam to come back here. But we are unable to recast the Haunted Dead. We can cast our Liliana if we want to. We don't have to attack with the Prized Amalgam here. So we also have Voldaren Pariah, which we can madness out with our Jace. So this deck has a lot of different lines to it. We can also discard the Haunted Dead and then regrow it. So I think we want to keep our Prized Amalgam back because it feels like we're ahead moving towards the late game here. So I'm fine with just playing a land and saying go. Voldaren Pariah is triple black to madness out. So we have to keep that in mind. And it sacrificed 3 other creatures in order to flip it. Okay, so here's Tamiyo, main deck Tamiyo. So we'll see. Okay, so our opponent's actually plussing Tamiyo on the 2 spell Quellers. But I don't think this is going to really work out the way our opponent was hoping. And we actually drew a Mindbender off the top, so we can potentially play that on our next turn. But we're going to go ahead and madness out the Voldaren Pariah. And our opponent's going to be able to draw a card, but we are going to be able to get rid of this, one of these spell Quellers, I should say. And we're not really in too much danger here. We have a Mindbender that we can emerge in on our next turn if we want to. We can also go ahead and take out the Tamiyo if we would prefer to go in that direction. And I think we do want to make the conservative play and just go ahead and get rid of the Tamiyo here. That's going to mean Grasp of Darkness on Reflector Mage. And attacking Tamiyo Field Researcher with our 2 creatures here. Then we can follow it up with Liliana. And we could loot with Jace here. We'll wait. And probably should have played the Choked Estuary on that turn, but it's alright. Our opponent's just so far behind here. And we can follow up with this Mindbender next turn. We're not really in any rush whatsoever. So, yeah, we're ahead in a few different ways. We've got a Planeswalker now. Our opponent's Planeswalker is gone. We've got more creatures on board. And we've just got the inevitability overall. And I'm fine with just pitching. We can pitch the Haunted Dead, the Choked Estuary, or the Liliana. There's arguments to all of them. But I'm going to go ahead and pitch the Haunted Dead here. And we drew Dark Salvation, which is a sweet draw. So the question is, our opponent is representing Collected Company. It could be Archangel Avacyn that our opponent has in hand. So we could just go ahead and play the Mindbender right now to see exactly what's going on. We could also just cast this Dark Salvation on the Spell Queller. Get a couple of 2/2s. I think I like just going ahead and getting this Mindbender into play. But that would tap us out. We also have the option of flipping Jace this turn. So, alright, let's go ahead and go with the Mindbender play. We'll see how it works out. And we're definitely going to be sacrificing the Prized Amalgam here. So if our opponent has a Collected Company, I'm definitely, or any sort of big spell, this is going to be when we're going to see it come down. Okay, so here is the Company. Alright, it's going to be Reflector, Mage, and Nissa, so not actually a bad hit from our opponent. I'm expecting the Reflector Mage to bounce the Pariah. So that is going to happen. But we're going to get to see our opponent's hand right now. And it looks like... Alright, so we're going to start with the 3 or less The card with converted mana costs 3 or less. So let's go with the Tireless Tracker. And then we can grab this Elder Deep Fiend as well. So that's just huge that we're also going to be able to grab the Deep Fiend out of our opponent's hand. Now we can go ahead and loot. Discard this extra Choked Estuary. Play our land for the turn. Now we can go ahead and reuse the Haunted Dead if we so choose to. We also could flash back the Grasp of Darkness. And I think I would rather just flash back the Grasp of Darkness here. We can get rid of our opponent's Nissa and shut down our opponent's Spellqueller. So overall, a pretty good turn for us. This deck has a lot of moving parts to it. And now we've still got this Dark Salvation in hand. We also can potentially flip our Voldaren Pariah. So I kind of like just doing that, although that would, I guess, require sacrificing... No. Okay, so I think what we want to do is start out by just attacking with our Distended Mindbender. So let's start off with that. If our opponent blocks, no problem. Okay, looks like no blocks. So what we are going to do now is we are going to use the Haunted Dead and discard the Voldaren Pariah for its madness cost, as well as the Lily. And that's going to also trigger the Prized Amalgam in our graveyard. And then once that Prized Amalgam comes in, it's going to give us enough creatures to sacrifice to the Voldaren Pariah to flip it, and it looks like our opponent's going to concede because the writing was basically on the wall for that game. So, yeah, I mean, this deck just turns the corner really easily. That Pariah getting madnessed in a couple times was pretty nice. Not going to lie about that. So, Bant seems to be a pretty solid matchup for this deck. Don't think we need to go ahead and board in counterspells. Languish is an option, but it does kill some of our own threats. Relentless Dead is a card we can consider boarding out, but let's go ahead and try this same configuration. It may be that we want the Languishes, but pretty happy, felt pretty great for the first game in this matchup. And Bant Company is one of the most popular decks in the format, so having a good matchup against it is definitely important. So it looks like our opponent is taking a mulligan. We're going to keep kind of another slow hand. We would like something like a Jace or a Crypt Breaker, but can't have everything. And we still had that Dark Salvation in our hand last game. We just never even cast it. It would have been quite nice, killing one of our opponent's creatures and getting us a bunch of 2/2s. So next turn, we're almost certainly going to be deploying the Liliana. If our opponent does have something like a Spellqueller, we're just going to have to live with that. Although, okay, it looks like it's going to be an Advocate for this turn. And we drew a second Lily, which isn't really that necessary right now. So it may be that we're going to have to actually start hard casting our Haunted Dead. Unfortunately, we didn't draw something like a Jace this turn to really be able to fully go off like last game. But our opponent doesn't seem to have a great draw either. There's a hard cast Reflector Mage. So, here comes the Haunted Dead. And our Liliana is growing and growing and growing, ticking up. So that is something our opponent has to be aware of. And this is just going to be a passing of the turn, it looks like. So our opponent has 3 cards in hand at the moment. I think we may just want to go ahead and fire off this Dark Salvation here. Try to get this Sylvan Advocate off the table. So let's go for it. And we'll see if our opponent has a counterspell or some sort of response here. But it looks like the answer is our opponent did not have anything in response. But our opponent is still has 5 mana up, so that's representing a lot of different potential cards. So I think we just pass the turn here. And it looks like our opponent does have something. It's going to be an Archangel Avacyn here. So the Avacyn is going to try to pressure our Liliana because our Liliana has been ticking up. It's already at 6 loyalty. And if we're able to keep these creatures in play, we can potentially sacrifice them to our Voldaren Pariah. So we'll see how our opponent elects to attack this. We don't really want this Archangel Avacyn to flip. And I think we just go ahead and chump block here. Although our opponent is attacking us with the Avacyn, which is a little suspicious, rather than attacking the Liliana. But, yep, just going to go ahead and block it. We'll respect that our opponent knows what they're doing. Alright, so here's a Selfless Spirit. So it looks like our opponent is going to be able to flip this Avacyn. And our opponent has the option of redirecting the 3 damage that would be dealt to us to the Liliana, and that is what's going to happen. So now our opponent's left with 2 cards in hand. We still have this Voldaren Pariah in our hand. Also just picked up a copy of Ruinous Path, which we could use here. If our opponent had a Spell Queller, it would not be good for us. So I think it's a close call. We could also go for the play of getting back our Haunted Dead this turn. And that play seems pretty reasonable. Alright, let's go for that line. So we're just going to plus on the Avacyn and pass back the turn, rather than playing into a potential Spell Queller. Obviously, we don't know that our opponent has a Spell Queller in hand, but we don't want to get blown out by it. So we're going to go ahead and discard the Pariah and a land. So the Pariah is going to be able to madness in here. Although it looks like our opponent might have Summary Dismiss. Okay, no, it's going to be Learn from the Past. So we could actually respond to the Learn from the Past. by using the Haunted Dead's ability again. And I think that may actually be the play. So our opponent's attempting to shuffle our graveyard. And we're going to go ahead and regrow our Haunted Dead yet again. This is going to mean that the madness from the Pariah isn't going to happen. But we can get the Pariah back with the Liliana. So I'm not sure if this was right or not. But it was definitely a close call. Interesting play there. So this turn we're definitely going to use this Ruinous Path. And -2 the Liliana, getting back our Pariah. So yeah, I mean, our opponent's got 3 cards in hand. We're not in a great position. That was an interesting sequence there. So it looks like Haunted Dead squaring off against Sylvan Advocate. There's another Voldaren Pariah. So we can go ahead and hardcast this one. And alright, it looks like our opponent has another copy, or a copy, I should say, of Collected Company. So that's not great news for us. That's going to allow the Reflector Mage to potentially bounce the Pariah. So that is what's going to happen here. And we definitely are incentivized to block with the Haunted Dead. We actually want the Haunted Dead in our graveyard here pretty badly. So, interesting to see what our opponent might have drawn here, because we know it's not a land, otherwise our opponent would have already played it. And it looks like it's just going to be a passing of the turn here. So, we're going to go ahead and use our Haunted Dead. And madness out the Pariah here. And hopefully this works. Hopefully our opponent didn't pick up some sort of a counterspell. And that's also going to trigger the Prized Amalgam. So, right now, we don't know what's in our opponent's hand, but I think we should just go ahead and try to transform our Pariah. If this works, it's going to be great for us. So, yep, that's going to cause our opponent to just go ahead and sacrifice their whole board and leave us with a 6/5 flyer. It's also going to mean that our Haunted Dead and Prized Amalgam are back in the graveyard, and that's going to do it. Wow.